everyone. Welcome back to our webinar series, Embracing Change. We have Kathleen O'Hara. Kathleen, when she has a moment. In from Palm Desert in California. Thank you, Kathleen, for being with us so early in the morning. You need to turn your audio on. Your audio's off. Can't hear you, Kathleen. Your audio's still off.
Okay, I thought I turned.
There we go.
Thank you for staying up so late.
You woke up early. I'm staying up late. Same.
Right.
All right. So thank you, everyone. So we're going to discuss today step 4 of the 8 steps to self-discovery in the Qineticare assessment. So Kathleen, let's start really from the basics and go down to what does mental and emotional well-being mean?
Okay, the short form of mental and emotional well-being is the knowledge of what your emotions are, what your thoughts are, how they originated, what their effects are on you, your relationships, and life in general. So that deep knowledge of what you're feeling and what you're thinking, because curiously, as human beings, you think it's a natural thing we would understand that, but we don't. Because we pave over a lot of feelings and thoughts, and we just, rush forward. And often, it's good to put the feelings and thoughts aside, but other times you really need an awareness of them to operate in the fullest, most conscious way. And so really, I think this part of the Qi assessment is to help the person understand thoughts and feelings, how they originated, and what patterns they create, and how you can master them. This is a key skill.
All right, so let's go and try and understand. How can we understand our thoughts and emotions, right?
Okay.
What does it even mean?
Let's
uncover. Let's go slowly and let's
right.
pretend we're having an artichoke and we want to get to the heart. So let's start.
I like that analogy. It's complex, as everybody knows. This is why people like to pave over it, because they're like, I don't want to deal with that. But let's take, the fact that your feelings are obviously something you feel about a situation. So I'm angry, I'm happy, I'm sad. We tend to push them down, pave over them, and act or react, right? The feelings themselves come out in a kind of sideway notion. So, you might have a problem going on, but you're angry about. But you get angry at, your employees, your shopkeeper, your wife, your husband, your kids, and you're not sure why. Because it's a reaction to something you are feeling, but not owning.
Okay.
You're passing it on. That's one of the fundamental concepts of psychology, right? Is that we displace a feeling onto something else because we don't want to feel it. If any thoughts on that?
No. So now I've got a feeling A, but I'm taking it out on B, right? And so now, how do I learn to recognize that? How do I learn to kind of not do that? Or let's start with the awareness, right? How do I become aware of that?
Well, this is the difficulty, and this is where the work comes in, because it means sitting and tracing something to its root, or at least uncovering the plant itself. What am I actually feeling?
Okay.
And then you would be surprised at how many people don't know, because there's layers and they don't particularly want to deal with it, right? So I'm angry at something, but I feel like I'm not really allowed to be angry. So I bury it and it goes somewhere else. Let me explain. We'll jump ahead a little bit and say that emotions, one of the primary techniques that human beings do is called repression. And this will happen to children, right? They feel something and they don't necessarily understand it because the frontal cortex is not developed to interpret it. So at first they cry, and sometimes they're told don't cry, whatever. So something happens in the child life, either a death, something they can't quite handle, right? Which is a lot of things. They might be at school and they're bullied, or they might have a parent who doesn't understand them, or a sibling conflict. So they can't understand the feeling. There's no one there to explain it to them and help support it. So they internalize that feeling and push it down. So repression is, I can't handle a feeling because I don't understand it. I'm going to bury it like a seed underneath, or I'm going to throw it in the basement.
But is this conscious or subconscious?
It's subconscious.
Okay.
So this is the concept of what you call repression. And this happens, by the way, to everybody. Everybody. It's just a natural tendency. When I can't handle something or don't understand it, I'm going to push it down and act, however I act. I adapt to that. So I might adapt a personality of always smiling and always saying yes and always being, but meanwhile, I have not processed this energy and this, so there's a disconnect now. So then people go through life, they go to school and they find out that really it's not safe to say A or B or C, better bury that one. Oh, that person doesn't like me, or in performance, I better perform and be the best and the best. Never mind how I actually feel about this choice I'm making. So what ends up is that the basement gets pretty packed up. And all of a sudden, and because we keep throwing, open the door, oh, put that in there. And we become very good at packing the basement. That's the unconscious. But what happens is, it always leaks. Repression is not a complete mechanism. It was only meant to be temporary until you could figure out, either through adults to children, how to handle something, what a feeling is, and how to safely express it, right? Or when you're older, to actually look at it. Now, a lot of times, surprisingly, neither of those things happen. So you have an adult, goes off to college, is, and operating on the surface and can actually be very successful. But meanwhile, all that stuff is kicking around in the basement. So when it's triggered by self-doubt, a relationship that isn't going well, something happens at work, people are problems, it re-triggers that early experience, and you don't quite know how to handle it. So it takes more energy to repress it when you actually should be looking at it with help and mastering it. Okay, this is a feeling of sadness, I can handle it. Okay, this is anger, and it's connected to this. I need to learn how to express anger. So let me jump ahead to thoughts and how it works with thoughts. So you have a feeling that's in the basement, right? But because repression is never complete, it escapes. And where does it go? It forms thoughts, anxiety. It could create one feeling can create 1,000 thoughts. And those thoughts
So not the same thought, different
they're
thoughts.
not the same thought. They could be, something bad's going to happen. Oh God, people don't like me. Oh, how am I going to get that business deal? Oh, okay. Well, what's my wife? Who's going to marry me? You know, it's all of this. The feeling repressed comes up to the surface, but because you're not understanding it, it fuels negative thinking, which results in self-doubt, anxiety, anger at things that have nothing to do with the situation or the feeling. So those feelings send up and fuel thought patterns. So what happens is we become unaware of our thoughts. I don't want to think that. Oh no, don't think. So that too is operating under the surface.
So we've got a
So now you
basement
have,
full
right,
of stuff, and thank God that except for North Americans, we don't have big basements or no basements. Just kidding, right? It's the
golly,
truth.
the unconscious mind has a really big basement, but it's not unlimited. So the container,
Yeah.
look, it's just like, you know, if you bury nuclear energy, you're going to have a really hard time containing that. It will leak. I don't care, but I mean, you gotta insulate with lead and every other kind of thing. So our personalities, to be truly free and agile and master thoughts and emotions, we have to know what's in there. And most people will say, oh my God, that's so scary. But it's actually not.
Exactly.
It's just a simple process of opening the door and sorting through. And sometimes it is quite painful, undoubtedly. But then you have to weigh which is more painful. Allowing these thoughts and allowing the emotions to cook and fester and send up thoughts that are not healthy, or just unpacking it.
So you when you start this process, you're going straight for the feeling, or you're starting with the thought. Where do you begin, and how relevant is each one?
Right. So the process becomes what's appropriate for each individual person. Some people are more thought-based, and it's easier to track what they're thinking. Some people are more feeling-based. So I will ask a series of questions, like just in general in the session, like, what are you thinking? What are you feeling? So what happens is the person gets used to connecting what they're feeling today and discovering it, and then we connect it to the energy that has been contained in the personality. And usually what will happen, which is very interesting, when you choose to engage in a process, it's almost like you're ready to do the work. So life will throw up the things that will challenge you.
Okay.
Because normally, as humans, we're kind of like, yeah, if I don't have to deal with it, I'm not going to. Well, you know, but when life, like it's a broken relationship somehow, or you can't get to your goals, or you keep having the same argument with yourself or others over and over and over again. I see this a lot in couples, right?
Oh,
They
it's the
keep
same.
having they keep having the same fight.
Okay.
It could be anything. What color the sky is. It's because they've gotten locked in a communication pattern that is unconscious, but very painful. So the work becomes now, right, forget what you're bothered about. What's really bothering you? So people feel like they're not heard. Well, they're not hearing themselves either. So the individual work becomes what's really bothering you. This is a fascinating process, is once you have a clear line to your feelings, minus all the earth covering it. You get pretty good at instinctually knowing what you're feeling. Therefore, you have more resources, right? Because it makes sense. You go direct, oh, okay, this is me feeling that. Because you've identified your patterns, you've identified your feeling. Now we can start to master it.
So it's like a muscle. You're practicing and slowly you develop a muscle to be able to go there, bring it up, process it, and kind of not have it go back in the basement. But as you process it, it dissolves, right? Quote unquote.
Right. Now, curiously, a lot of the thoughts will disappear because the thoughts are not repressing the feelings.
Okay.
So with a person that I'm tracking the feeling state with, they will start to notice their thoughts change. Generally, what I do is I track both of them. It's just some people are more in tune with emotions, some people are more in tune with, or their thoughts are really bothering them. So let's say, for example, they're feeling a lot of anxiety. And there's no real reason to feel that anxiety. There's nothing particularly wrong. So what we uncover is where that thinking pattern came from and originated. This is very important in terms of recognizing transgenerational effects, how mom and dad were, how the generation before that, because we have what's also called transgenerational patterns, right? This is how my family does it. Or there was a trauma in 1900 and we are still feeling that. By the way, they've done extensive, well, not as extensive as we could, but to find that survivors of trauma in a country, for example, or a particular family will transfer. It changes, it's epigenetic.
Yeah.
So in utero, that's being passed through. The good news is it's not a permanent change and it can be readapted.
Okay.
Right? So it's even more important, I think, today to clear, we have an opportunity to clear a lot of transgenerational and cultural trauma. For example, I always had this thing because I'm half Irish. Growing up, we had plenty of food, but there was always this notion of starvation or, not enough food. And of course, my grandparents told stories about the Irish potato famine. That was locked in because 1.5 million people died and the rest went to America. So, it was a real trauma which changed the epigenetic pattern and showed up in future generations. So I had to do some serious work around that notion that the potatoes were going to go bad and we were all going to starve. So it's very fascinating in the work, right, to get into and understand yourself, because self-knowledge and self-awareness enrich. It's not just a pursuit and a dilettante hobby. It's actually extremely useful because it means that you yourself will have more energy and resources to help yourself and your children, your family. So it isn't just a sort of, gee, I think I'll do that today. No, I think it's a very necessary and important research on yourself to do.
So the people coming in to do the Qiate, some of them are coming in to improve performance. Other people are coming in because they're not well, or other people are coming in for some transition in their life or a trigger that's happening. Does it really matter when they come to, let's say, the fourth step of whether there's actually an obvious reason versus not, in terms of unpacking or opening up that basement and relating the thoughts that may be suppressed? Do you feel like in the process, is it different, or what happens?
Different to,
I mean, is one easier than the other? Are people responding differently to you when?
no, you know, everybody has a history
Okay.
of putting things in the basement.
Okay.
Some have more issues as a result of that, but we have all done it because it's a universal mechanism that protects us at the moment. So depending on the weight in the basement is how it's going to affect you. Some will be obviously more affected, but no one gets away unscathed. So if you look at it purely as an equation, emptying that basement gives you that boost for performance because now you have more energy. Now you understand where these thoughts and feelings are coming. And who couldn't use that?
Yeah.
You then have the power and the capacity for change, better relationships, because you're not doing the same thing over and over again. Self-doubt is mastered. Anxiety is mastered because you know the source of it and you're able to discharge that energy. Because then there are tools that I teach to maximize and optimize that new energy. And that's as important as discovering it, because discovering it will dissipate a lot of the patterns.
Yeah.
But what remains is the habits. So what we do is we put new skills in, new ways of thinking differently. We're able now to emphasize those. Change becomes easier. Because otherwise, what happens is you layer on the possibility of change, the strategy of change, but you've got the stuff weighing you down. So why carry extra weight? So for some people, it's going to be more of a tune-up. For most people, it's going to be somewhere in the middle. They're going to really, really benefit from it because they're more weighed down than they realize. And I think also when people reach, let's say 40, 30, 40, 50, 60, those are life cycles, right? They're going to become more aware of what they're carrying, and they're going to want to get rid of it. They're going to want to put some sort out and make sense of their life. For a 20-year-old, if there's trauma in the background, that's going to be really useful. Imagine clearing the basement when you're 20. How much more energy? If you haven't done it at 20 or 30 or 40, by the time you're 50, you're really going to want to clear the basement out. You're going to want to optimize because now it becomes about health.
So you're saying that you would recommend that people at university or going into university should, as a part of their hygiene, clear the basement, right? Because a lot of times they say, right, every day we ask people to brush their teeth, right, before going to bed. But do we do the emotional and mental cleanse, right?
Probably not. And I will say this, and I'm very happy to see this, is that more 20-year-olds than ever know the language of development, and they want that. So they're jumping way ahead. They have an edge because think about it. If you understand these things about yourself and correct your thinking, it's entirely possible you may make better choices in relationships, and jobs and businesses and choice of partners.
Everything, yeah.
Right, because what happens is, unfortunately, with all that stuff in the basement, it actually will affect the choices you make. You will tend, this is incredible, right? You will tend to make choices dependent on your parental images of what is right and what isn't right. And maybe that's good and maybe it's not so good.
Yeah.
So then you have a marriage, and then you have children, and then you realize, oh my God, I picked the wrong partner. And you've already done 10 or 15 years, and maybe you could have spared yourself and everybody else that pain. So, it used to be the 20-year-olds were, that sense of immortality, they weren't interested. But with the way, it's kind of more popular now, kids really will do. And this is, I'm sorry to say this, but there's more trauma than ever in the world. I mean, it's immediate, isn't it? So kids worry more about their resources, their strengths, who they are, what they're doing, because they're bombarded on a daily basis with a lot of choices, and some of which are not good. So yes, I highly recommend that hygienic approach before it's deeply layered. And by the way, I've had tremendous success with young people, and I love that when they do the work and they go ahead and they make more informed choices, so they can become better spouses, parents, and leaders. They can achieve their full potential.
So you're feeling that now there's less stigma to be
Yes.
speaking to somebody like yourself who's not a life coach, is actually a psychotherapist. It's
Right.
From a mental perspective, from a labeling perspective, it's not considered the same, right?
Right.
So,
and that's why we chose to call it, right, mental and emotional well-being, because we wanted to get away from the stigma of therapy and people knowing our deepest dark, all that stuff, plus nobody wants to be dependent. But if we call it well-being and mastery of emotions and mental thoughts, that is a much better or more appetizing way of looking at it. But of course, it does involve basic and fundamental psychotherapeutic techniques. It has to.
Yeah. But I think one thing we should clarify while we're sharing is that a lot of people, by watching, movies and programs, think that this is something that never ends, right? And we've been helping together many families, right? And that's not the case, right? So I think we need to also break that stigma as well of being on that couch forever, which is what everybody thinks.
I'm really glad you brought that up, because originally with Freudian psychoanalysis, right, which was the original, nobody knew anything before. They never even talked about the mind or emotions or anything. It was, 3, 4, 5 times a week. So, I mean, where people found the time, I don't know, and it would go on for years.
Yeah.
Now, and for many years, I was a therapist who saw people once a week, and it, because there was so much education involved in those days, 30 years ago, it would take a longer time.
Okay, so
not
it's
10
true.
years, though. Okay. It could take up to a year and a half. What I'm saying now is people are so much more aware. You read it, you have conversations about it. So usually when people come to this segment of Qi'e, they're pretty aware. And these are people that are used to moving and shaking in the world. So it's not that lengthy for them. They get it pretty quickly. And I like that. So then they get their sessions, we do the piece of work, and then they move on to the next. They again, it can go pretty quickly.
Because it's interesting, because with Michel Gollet, when you're doing the biometric data, you can see the level of anxiety and the level of stress, right, going on. And it's not just that, it's when I'm working. It's when I'm working, when I'm eating, when I'm working out, when I'm sleeping, when I'm doing all the pieces. And if you see, there's some people who you can see consistent anxiety throughout. And it's like, wait a minute, that's a serious stress to the sympathetic nervous system, right? While others, you can see the up and down and the rest and recovery. Right. So, the different pieces actually don't allow people to kind of maneuver out of reality, right? And that's why they're all set up in a way that they kind of reaffirm each other, you know, from that perspective. So now
from the T8.
Yeah, I'm talking.
Yes,
You know,
definitely, because one is interlinked. This is why it's a wheel, not a straight line.
Yeah.
And that's a much more integrative function, which didn't used to happen, right? Look, I've been a therapist for 28 years, but I was into sort of wellness in the 70s and all that. But one piece didn't correlate to the other until around about 1970. People realized, my God, we need a wheel, not a straight line. So Qineticare does that. And so it's not one person doing all the work. The wheel is interactive, which is great. It goes much faster that way.
Now, in terms of the processes of, you know, mental, emotional thoughts, emotion, the processes, what is going on? I mean, yes, you talked about suppression and then it's an expression, but what is going on neurologically or biologically? Can you shed a little bit of light on that? Like, what is the actual process, the mental, emotional process?
Well, look, we're still trying to find out neurologically how things affect, right? So this is a psychical model.
Okay.
Obviously, you're not putting, suitcases in your butt, but metaphorically you are. And we still don't know the effects of what it takes to repress an emotion as a child and carry that with you the entire life. I've had people say, like in a really, really old family, that he was the next in line. And his father died very suddenly when he was 6. So he went from being a child at 6 to the 15th generation. He's it. That's him. He had no idea what was going on. So he repressed, and he will tell this story because he's done all his work. And he said, I didn't know what to do for years. I carried this around. I was a child inside of a man. So that's one example, might be a big example, but everybody does it because something will happen along the line that causes that repression. Now, what we don't know, and it sounds like doing the genetic work, we're starting to make links, right? From what that repressed feeling, what impact that suitcase, that boulder, that nuclear bit has systemically. We know that it creates a high stress level. Okay. So that when you're triggered, everything shoots up because you don't know what's going on. So it's all happening unconsciously. Now, again, when you're 20 or 30, you can handle that. Is it good? No, but your body will. But as you get older, it starts to manifest in illness and all sorts of things because you're carrying decayed material, basically. And now it turns toxic. This is, by the way, why a lot of substance abuse happens, because the decaying material turns toxic and people turn to something for the pain.
So they're numbing it.
They're self-medicating.
Yeah.
And it doesn't have to be a chemical substance. It could be could be shopping, gambling, relationship. It could be a number of different things. It's a diversionary tactic. Okay. It's very unhealthy.
What are the influences on the development of all these? I mean, I know you're saying they're events, they're traumas, but what are the other influences? I mean, that impact the thoughts and emotions?
As a child?
Or as an adult, any time. I mean.
Well, look, so you have a certain set of coordinates as a child. Maybe you had really a very nice childhood. Maybe there was actually no trauma, but maybe mom and dad were distant. Maybe, you feel some abandonment. Maybe there's like some insecurities there, but yeah, generally you're okay. But when you're 12, something terrible happens. Somebody dies, some thing happens to you, how do you handle that stress? If you're not supported at that time, that will affect you. Not in the same way as if you were fine, but it will still affect you. How do you process that? How do you integrate that and move on in a healthy way? Right? Now, again, today, more people are getting help. So we have kids like, that are going through a divorce with their parents, they're getting help. It's still going to be really painful, but they're managing it better.
There, yeah.
Right, right. So we can minimize some of those effects. They're still going to be painful.
So you talked about performance-wise, the advantage of lightening the load in terms of mental and emotional well-being to be able to make better decisions, better relationships, and all of that. But other than if somebody did not come to a psychotherapist or someone for help, what can they do to improve on their own? Like, what are some of the tactics? I mean, there's journaling. I don't know. What are some of the...
One of the things, and I am a devotee of and have been for, over 30 years, is meditation and mindfulness. Okay. Because if we look at the fact that we have three minds, we have a primitive mind, we have an analytical mind, which came later, and then we have the beyond time and space, the God space. Okay. Those three need to be functioning optimally. Most people will function in the first and second. And when they're triggered, they will revert to the first. What's the first? It's the primitive limbic system. Okay. I'm in danger. What can I do? And because you're not resourced, because you have so many blocks, you will go into that limbic system, which means I'm afraid of something. So I have to fight, flight, or freeze. So those become the adaptive mechanisms. When a person's in that system, they can't make good decisions. The second brain, okay, the analytical part, many people have that well developed. So they're able to disconnect, right? And they're able to make good business choices, but they're not happy and fulfilled because that other third brain, which I think creativity, all sorts of calmness, is the highest level of peace, that's not developed. So I think it's important for people to understand those three things and optimize them. And one of the tools, one of the best tools, and it's free to do, is meditation, which helps you to understand your thoughts, control the limbic system, and activate the highest mind. So you're cooking on all three burners. You master and control. And in my sessions, I teach that. I show the person how to do that. And it's extremely effective because we can cut through so many things. That's why the work can go faster. So we have...
Yeah. Go ahead, sorry.
So we have the information about the patterns and the transgenerational. We identify stressors, right? We clear out all the childhood and young adult traumas. And then we are teaching a way to identify feelings and master them, and identify the thoughts and correct them. And then purpose and meaning becomes easier to accomplish. So that's one of the tools. If you don't do anything at all, at least do mindfulness. So you can check in with yourself.
But a lot of times when you start that process, stuff starts to come up. What is about that? Why is stuff starting to come up?
Because you're quiet. Most people use diversionary tactics to avoid what they don't want to deal with. Any kind of diversion. Lots of noise. Drugs is one extreme, but there's loads in the middle. I don't want to feel that. Let's turn on some music, which could be good. But if it's a diversionary tactic and you're avoiding things, it's helping momentarily, but it's not solving the problem. And again, in terms of performance, imagine an athlete training for not a sprint, for a marathon, because life is a marathon. And that athlete is carrying all sorts of, weights from the past. Not a pretty picture. How do you expect him or her to really excel? Sooner or later, it'll catch up with you. And anyway, who wants to run a race with all that stuff?
But that's what we're doing all day. We're carrying
All
all the stuff.
all
But most people are scared to look in the basement, right?
That's why people wait until things get so bad that they're forced to get there. It's like, when you put off having an operation, you're like, yeah, I can handle it. And then the doctor says, you're in big trouble. So you will do what you need to do. Psychologically, it's so different because, boy, people are great at pushing things away until something happens. So also, just like running a race, like I said, is no good. Why would you wait until something really bad happens to do what you could do earlier and optimize your health?
But why are they doing it? You're the psychotherapist.
They're doing it because they are scared and they think it's so awful. Because remember, the repression happened a long time ago. They were scared then, they're still scared. If I had to repress it at 5 or 6 or 8 or 10, gosh, it's a monster under the bed. And what you really find is, you know what? You're human. It's not so terrible. But you need somebody you trust as your guide. And that's, to me, the joy of therapy and well-being, is you get to be the guide for the person and let them know that they're going to be able to do this.
So we've done the meditation. Now, what about the journaling? How does that help? I mean, that's kind of a conversation with yourself, kind of letting it all out. Like
it's a conversation. Well, it's a conversation with yourself, but in the mindfulness, you're getting acquainted with yourself.
Okay.
For the first time, probably ever. And you're going to things will start coming up, thoughts, feelings, and you will then journal them to see them. Oh, so that's what it is. So that's an adjunct to meditation because it helps you understand what's coming up. Dreams, too, will start working and manifesting because now you've opened the unconscious mind. So because we are always working towards health, believe it or not, the organism wants health. That's what will happen. It will encourage you to do that, and it will give you signs that you're on the right track.
Okay,
right?
So now we've done the journaling. What else? What are the suggestions? Would you?
Walk nature.
Okay.
Nature is a great healer because of the constancy of nature. In other words, even though seasons change, nature is always there. And we see the beauty and the endurance and the nurturing of nature. We feel safe within that. We see the beauty of it. And I think it reflects our innate goodness. So that's another very powerful tool. Love, appreciation, gratitude, because as those negative thoughts subside, we now see it's an equation. So we have this on the one side, the negative, the self-doubt, and we start to create things to balance the scale. The goodness, the innate talents that one has, the good things. And then we start to balance those. And this side goes down, this side goes up.
Wow. Okay, now, so I've lightened myself up. I'm doing all these experiences, right? But like I'll tell you, like a lot of times we're working with families and we see the physical symptom where we are actually helping them with the source, and you've been working together on these things, right? So how come, it's so difficult to explain this and to see that connection between the mental emotional imbalance or well-being, lack of well-being, to the physical symptom that's being expressed in different forms, right?
Well, I just think that's because of linear thinking. So we think things are independent of one another. So we don't connect cause and effect. And sometimes, we have to, we're still doing research and learning about how A affects health. Some is very easy to see, like too much cortisol in the system is going to, but we're still looking at how stress affects the brain, what messages are being sent, how it affects the overall health, right? Qineticare is going a long way towards that, right? So now this is why you devised this mental and emotional well-being to support that. Because if you're only looking at the physical, you've already got a symptom. You're not addressing the mental and emotional thought patterns which may be contributing to that. We don't even have to know exactly how. We know that there's a causal relationship because we know the mind and body are connected. We don't have to know everything. But clearly, if you have negative thought patterns and you're not sure about your emotions and how the whole thing works, you need to take a look and clear it out. Get it working, tune it up.
Get out there and start running. Start jogging. If you're not going to start jogging, at least brisk walking.
Right.
Right. In terms of, so what other thoughts, what other things can we share to help people not only understand, we've given them the tools, we've given them a basic understanding, we've given them, what it can create, right? What else can we share to help people?
Let's take today. All right. So if you're ready to go to bed, take a quick review of your day. If there's a little snag, something that might have bothered you, ask yourself, review it, and ask yourself how you felt about it. Something as simple as that, because you begin to catalog and connect your feelings with events. Well, what do I think about that? Like sometimes I'll ask people, just notice what you're thinking during your day. And then people will get used to this and they'll say, like you'll have a thought that comes across the screen and you're able to look at that thought and say, why would I think that about myself or another person? So you start to connect how you think and feel with, is this what I really want? Is this who I am? Where did that thought come from? Let's substitute that thought for a healthy thought. So people can start doing that tonight and tomorrow morning. Have 5 minutes, 5 to 8 minutes of quiet time where you're simply breathing. See what comes up. What's on your mind? What are you thinking? And then if a thought occurs to you, just say, is this what I really want to be thinking today? Is this the best use of my thoughts? And you might, after a while, start to connect these negative thoughts with behavior. And then you ask yourself, do I really need to handle this that way? Maybe there's a different way, a better way. So we begin to know ourselves, because thoughts and feelings are how we express ourselves. If you don't know what they are, how can you have control over what you're doing? So the whole process is that awareness, right? Understanding what you think and how you feel, and making strategic corrections.
How does that, because when we do the review and the assessment, we also look at how it impacts our perspectives, right?
Yes, because look, if I discover that really what I think about myself is not good, that's what's sabotaging my goals, altering my perspective. Because obviously, if that's what you believe, that's your worldview. Is that really what you want to be thinking about yourself? Or is there a better way? So there are simple tools and techniques to get there. First, you have to understand what they are, though. It's a process of self-knowledge. And you can do that by tracking, you don't have to sit there 24 hours a day tracking thoughts. But if you tune in, it will surprise you what you're thinking. And that's the beginning of self-awareness. Then we can put strategies in to correct that. It's remarkable how it works. Remarkable. It's like, it's such a valuable tool to have because it will change things.
And this is to be kept to yourself, or is it something you would kind of share with your partner? Or is it to not?
Your partner is not your therapist. And people make that mistake. And then they, they're perhaps little bits of thoughts, they're not fully formed, and the partner is interested, but okay, what do you do with that? I think I would want to understand certain things and then have a conversation of mutual exchange about thoughts and feelings in a calm space. By the way, when I work with couples, when they're both able to identify what they're feeling and thinking, they can come together with communication techniques, and God, it's amazing what happens. Because people can understand that in a quiet, healthy tone. What they don't understand and nobody reacts to is being yelled at or fear or this or okay. Everybody freezes. You're back in the limbic system.
So this process you just described, it helps with the perspectives, I guess, also in the dynamics, right? Because that's another area
right.
that, so this basic awareness exercise, you feel
it will help. Remember, this is not a dilettante, let's just have some fun sort of technique and process. This is about improving yourself, your life, your relationships, your business. There's a goal here. It's not just, oh, I found this out about myself. No, we make that work for you. Because then you can change behavior. Everybody wants to change their behavior. Nobody wants to argue and do all this stuff. What they can't figure out how to change it. They know what the problem is, but what they don't understand is how they got there and how powerful their thoughts and feelings are. Once that's sorted out, you're able to change behavior. It just works that way.
So we got to get to the source. There's always a source to the
right.
actual. Okay.
Right. We have to dissipate those thoughts, change them.
Okay.
Right.
So it's reframing or diffusing, or it's
mastery. It's mastery. So I know that I think a particular way. I catch my thoughts. I meditate every morning. I catch my thoughts. It's never 100%. You get broadsided, but you can find your way back quicker. And then you look at that and you say, oh, this is me thinking X. I don't need to think that.
Okay.
There's no point to that. This is me feeling really angry or put upon by somebody. Okay, I get it. What are you going to do about it? What behavior are you going to put in? Because feelings are strong. The feeling of being attacked or threatened, the feeling of losing something or having lost. These are really tough things to deal with. right? And as humans, we deal with them a lot. So how are we going to deal with them? Do we let them, like run us, or do we learn to master them?
And you feel that it is possible to master. It's not
Absolutely.
something that's just a conversation that is the thoughts and emotion driving me, or am I able to drive them?
You're right. Otherwise, then human behavior basically is uncontrollable. We have no control over ourselves, and I don't believe that. Look, a personality is a blend of many things. A personality will have all the same human emotions as everybody else. But how they got there, how they're calibrated, has to do with the experience of that person. So unpacking that experience and using certain techniques, you're going to be able to control your feelings. Because if you weren't, that would mean everybody would just be in collision with feeling. And by the way, that's what's happening out there. Because people are saying, well, I just feel that way. Deal with it. Wow. Not taking responsibility for your impact on humanity. So we have an obligation to ourselves to master our thoughts and feelings and be the best we can be for ourselves and others.
Say, I can't help what I feel.
You can feel that, but understand what you're feeling and mediate the behavior. Okay. Because feeling and behavior are two different things. Yeah. You cannot help what you feel, although you can master it. You can put the intellect over emotion. Otherwise, you just have a wild free-for-all. It's just not going to work. And we see that a lot in narcissistic culture. Well, I feel that way, deal with it. Yeah. All sorts of outrageous behavior to other human beings, justified by the fact that I feel that way. You're entitled to your feelings, but acting out on them and hurting other people because you feel a certain way, I don't think that's what we want. So wouldn't it be better to understand those feelings and be able to master them and then get to your goal in a more rational way? You could still get but you're not going to get what you want that other way.
Yeah. So it's basically improving the delivery. I mean, I used to pre-cancer do things by force, right? And power, like force versus power. And now post is about please and thank you and using power, which is less energy consuming, a lot more, much better delivery, quote unquote, right?
And, well, exactly. Because again, when we're in the limbic system and we want something, and the want is based on some need or something unconscious, we use three methods: fight, flight, or freeze. Fight means I'm gonna knock you out till you give it to me. So aggression is tied to a certain need, right? You can still have that need, but identify the need and use the rational mind to strategize how to get it in a peaceful win-win for everybody. And you do that. I know you very well. You always create win-wins for people. And that's one of the things I admire about you. You get your point across, but you're balanced between your needs and thoughts and goals with the other. And this is an important thing because we don't want to give ourselves away, but we also don't want to not think about the other person. Finding the boundary is a challenge for most people.
Yeah, that's a tough one to find, moving from me to we, but not losing me.
Exactly. So creating a win-win. Yeah. Where in a peaceful, rational way, you put forth what your needs and what your wants are. Yeah. In view of the other person, they can either accept or not accept, they can feed back on it, but the platform is more peaceful There's openness for negotiation. It isn't, okay, we're going to do it this way. You know, it's like, okay. It's the awareness.
Yeah. All right, we're coming to an end towards the end. Are there things that we didn't touch on, Kathleen, that you wanted to share? Any, and then of course, please, some last remarks that maybe you want to nudge everyone to think through or do or reconsider.
Yeah, I would conclude with that you cannot lose with mental and emotional well-being. It's fundamental to how you live. It's the health, your mental health, your emotional health. And you can avoid these things, but I would ask to look at the issues you might have in relationship and with yourself and see if that's optimal for you. If it isn't, then maybe there's some work around mastering the thoughts and emotions, creating real well-being, right? And I hope the conversation today encouraged people to look into that, to think about their thoughts, think of the areas in their life that could benefit from more cohesive thinking and feeling. You know, and I think it is a thoughtful thing. I think people have to think about that. Most people will say, yes, but what do I have to do? And I would remind people it's not as hard as you might think it is.
I think that's key, right? That it's not as daunting, it's not as hard, it's not as painful. Yeah, there will be times where, of course, it will be painful. Let's not kid ourselves, right? But I think rather than, like you said, doing the marathon, carrying all that stuff and expecting to get to the finish line, you know, without being completely exhausted and depleted, while instead you have the choice, right? To kind of, I wouldn't say sail through life, but at least, you know, have a smoother ride.
Right, and have some skills. And that reminds me, and the final comment I'll make is, you know, you don't want to come to the end of your life with regret and remorse about things you could have done. There'll be inevitably some of that. But as we get older in age, one of the things that is absolutely important is to clear the deck. If we've done that earlier, first of all, our health is more than likely going to be better. Our relationships and our legacy is going to be better, because you don't want to be sitting around in old age regretting things you could have done, because it will happen. Trust me, I know. As I get older, I'm acutely aware, because it always changes. But I'm glad that I did some of what I did and was able to correct some things before even more damage was done.
Yeah, so I think that's beautiful. Clear the deck and legacy, right? Think through the long game and and reconsider, maybe not kicking the can down the road, but maybe addressing certain things that we know innately needs to be addressed, but we keep, you know, lugging forward.
Right, because, you know, time passes quickly. I will say that. And you get to a certain age and you think, how did I get here? And boy, I wish I knew what I know now.
All right, Kathleen, thank you very much for taking the time, waking up. I know you always wake up early and meditate and then start your day, but thank you very much for your time. Thank you for the beautiful sharing and the different elements of wisdom and explaining the process and giving us a little bit of a nudge and a safe space to consider to do a little more than we are in this space to create the mental and emotional well-being, the form of health that you said that, you know, we don't want to end up at the end of the time and be in regret. So thank you. Thank you, Kathleen.
My pleasure. My pleasure. Thank you, everyone, for attending. I know it's late for a lot of you, but thank you. Hope to see you sometime.
Yes. Thank you, everyone. So we'll see you next week. We'll have Anissa coming in for step number 5 to talk about the beliefs and patterns. So some of the things that you touched on, the intergenerational and the patterns that we call them the souvenirs they collected during childhood. Thank you, everyone. See you next week. Thank you, Kathleen.